In 2014, the Israeli Knesset declared November 30th an annual Memorial Day for the 850,000 Jews expelled from Arab countries, many of whose families have lived there since biblical times. This year, on November 30th, we focus on the untold stories of the Jews of Egypt. 85,000 Jews lived in Egypt before the creation of the Jewish state of Israel. As of 2020, only 3 Jews remain. Sephardic history is vastly underrepresented in Jewish history texts and curriculums. It is our hope that this program will help instill a strong identity among future generations and strengthen them to withstand the challenges that they may encounter during their lifetimes. This morning, in all our community schools, our children learned about what life was like in Egypt with first-hand interviews. The Sephardic Heritage Museum has taken upon itself to educate the community on this important day. We thank Marlene Mamiye, who had the vision for this day and worked tirelessly for our community schools. She worked tirelessly with our community schools and with our center team to collaborate on this special event tonight. Marlene does this year after year, highlighting a different theme on this important day. This year, our center is on pace to run over 1,000 programs for the community. Part of our core mission is to be the cultural center of the community. We are honored to collaborate with the Sephardic Heritage Museum for this event. I'd like to call upon Mr. Joey Sitt, founder and chairman of the Sephardic Heritage Museum, to talk about his organization.
All right, so exciting. You know, look around the room. I have to admit, Marlene, I expected maybe 10, 20% of this turnout. Amazing, mind-boggling. There's got to be over 1,400 or 1,300 people here in the room. I think that's a reflective, just starting right in, of what an amazing community we have. How much care and passion we have for each other, for our histories, the legacies that we inherited from our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. And tonight's agenda is to bring another component to the fore, which is what happened to so many of our community members that were living in Syria for thousands of years and then went on to another country. Our community, by heritage, is one of the longest-lasting communities of any religion or any peoples to stay together for the distance that we have. We're a community that I often get reminded of that's multi-millennium old. We're now in the middle of restoring our community synagogues, one in Damascus and one in Aleppo. And those synagogues, someone reminded me, that we're restoring are older than the Western Wall. You know, we take the Western Wall so seriously, so important in terms of what it means for Jewish history, but yet we have our very own heritage and archaeological site that's multi-millennium old. As a community, we've always been a melting pot, first of 2 cultures, the Syrian Jews that were Mustab al-Arab in Syria, and then the Syrian Jews that came from the Sephardic world, and we became one and called ourselves Sephardic Jews. Tonight is the story of those community members that emigrated from mostly Syria, some not, some having a heritage even greater in Egypt, that went on to life in Egypt. In Egypt, like Syria, they had a wonderful life for so many years, great community, built Jewish organizations, schools, et cetera, and as often comes the challenge to our community as Jewish people, comes eventually somebody who comes along and says, whether it be good jealousy or other reasons, says they're not happy with the Jewish community. And I won't usurp from today's talk what I'm speaking right now, and you'll hear from other community members that have lived it and lived their life and experience, but I want to say bravo to them and what they did and created. If you stop and think about it, they left Egypt with nothing and then recreated community and families and organizations, and Baruch Hashem as well, financial success. In terms of Sephardic Heritage Museum, what's our goal? As I often say, every organization is so important. First, our host, the center. That's an incredible organization at keeping us all together. Our synagogues, our schools, our mikvahs, so many of our organizations. But at the end of the day, I always say the same thing. If our synagogue was located in Oklahoma and we went to visit and we were there, two of us sitting in Oklahoma with the rest of the folks, would that synagogue be as special as the synagogues are to us in our community? And at the end of the day, what's the difference at this center, at our synagogues? It's us. It's the concept of all of us being together, caring about each other, loving each other, and keeping all our great values alive and going on. And the challenge for us is normally when people move to a new country, they keep the old values. The Jews, the Ashkenaz did in America for so long. But eventually, it starts to fray. And in our community, we got blessed by two communities coming and revitalizing us. One was the later comer Syrians that came, the newcomers, as they're often called, that were kept by Assad in Syria until only 28 years ago. And then, of course, the Egyptian community, so many of them that came later, and also infused that freshness of culture and history and community to keep our values strong again, even as we live in America. The problem is, for the kids in the room, your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, it's going to be up to you in a much more challenging setting to figure out how you're going to keep us together as one community, as one people, and keep all of our values, be it our religion, charity, helping each other, or that funny word called Soffer, to keep that value system going. Anyway, that's what our organization is about in so many different ways, whether it's restoring, printing the books of the rabbis, creating the films, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we want to thank all of you guys for being a part of it tonight. And with that, normally you thank somebody at the beginning. I'm choosing to thank them at the end before the warm-up. It's Mamiye. Marlene has spent a gajillion, that's the only word I can use for it, a gajillion hours now, working tirelessly for decades for our community, to preserve our history, together with Rabbi Sultan, of course, but to document it, keep it alive, keep it fresh, and constantly be reminding us who we are, and make sure that, as she often would say, make sure that it's not just us that's proud of our history and our parents and our legacy, but make sure that the next generation is proud of who they are. Because if they're proud of who they are, they're going to want to perpetuate that, marry Jewish people, marry and keep our community strong and powerful as it's been for thousands of years now in our new home in America. So with that, Marlene had created before the talk tonight a clip for those folks to speak and hear and understand so much about the Egyptian, Syrian, or Sephardic community's history. And with that, we'll begin the clip. Thank you so much. And I see Marlene waving to me as she repeated to me before. She said all of her hard work she does unpaid. God bless her. She should be paid $1 zillion for all she does. But it does take capital and money, so anybody who wants to give a donation, Ike Sutton is one. We got Stephen Gidney and Alus. They're all open because all of this can happen and perpetuate with, obviously, all the community support. So again, hope you enjoy the show. Again, thank you to Marlene Mamiye.
In 1952, Egyptian Arabs rioted against their British rulers, and as they had in Syria, they took it out on the Jewish citizens.
In the Jewish ghettos of Cairo, people were attacked. Some of the guys were stabbed. A lot of people were killed in the ghettos. And that was major, catastrophic for them and very frightening.
Some of them, they killed them. It was the small city, they call it Harit al-Yahud, says that's for the Jewish. They went inside, they killed a family. It was terrible. It was terrible, terrible. We get very, very, very worried. It was not for the Jew no more. It's not the future for the kids. We can still stay there and working and do business.
During 1952, that was like a lot of riots in the streets and things. That's when it became very bad for the Jews in Egypt. We were starting to get scared. We felt strange in the country. In their mind, Jews and Zionists are killers and they took away their land.
Then, in 1956, Gamal Abdel Nasser became president. He believed that all foreign assets should belong to the state and began to seize banks, factories, and stores. A vehement anti-Zionist, Nasser used this policy to punish the Jews, making all Jewish businesses property of the Egyptian government.
The policy at the time of Nasser was to plunge into and take the Jewish funds away from them. Just to give you an idea, the estimated wealth today of the community of Egypt is $5.5 billion still left in Egypt that the Egyptian government has taken over, between hospitals, schools, old age homes, synagogues, land, etc.
It happened to my father. My father had 3 stores, textile wholesale. And after 1956, the stores didn't belong to him. They put a guard on these stores. It was very, very hard for him. He was always an independent person. To have a kid telling him what to do, it was depressing. And he couldn't take it.
I went down to the store in the morning on March 27. It was sealed. I went to my brother, he had the same problem. And we found out that it was Tamim. Tamim is that they took everything. They even came to my house and made an inventory of the dishes and plates. And my wife told the guy, but what if the kids break a plate or something? If they break a plate, put it in a box, put it in the corner. It's not yours. You got to account for it. So they did. And they opened her pocketbook. They took all our jewelry. They did what they want to. Nobody could argue with them.
I finished school in 1957 as a pharmacist. They put locks on the doors. I could not go into the lab where I was working. All the big stores, they were all owned by Jewish people. They nationalized all of them. People were taken out of their jobs or from their houses to the prison and out to the ship and out without a penny in their pockets.
Hundreds of Egyptian Jews were jailed, and more than 1,000 were expelled from the country as official enemies of the state.
We start right away to go to the Red Cross office in Cairo, and we fill up a form to move to the United States. We prepare everything, about 10 suitcases, and we put a Sefer Torah inside, and we leave to Egypt.
The Egyptian government's policies set in motion the flight of many of the Jews from Egypt. That was the end of a period in Egypt in which Jews had prospered, both in Alexandria and in Cairo, as part of a cosmopolitan community that did very well. But the war and its aftermath were disastrous for them, and many of the Jews at that point had to leave.
In 1940, Rabbi Kalmanovitz had joined forces with Isaac Shalam, raising funds and pressuring government officials to rescue European Jews. In the 1950s, he set out to rescue Arab Jews as well, lobbying Congress and the president. Now he decided to personally sponsor as many young men as he could to study at his yeshiva in Brooklyn. The rabbis at Yeshivat Ahava V'Ahava in Cairo sent word to Rabbi Kalmanowitz that they were afraid for their students' safety. He set out to bring them to Brooklyn, appealing to Congress to pass an emergency immigration bill to let the young men in.
A story came that a big rabbi from Mirror Yeshiva in New York sent a big lawyer to Egypt to get boys to Brooklyn to make them rabbis. At that time, my son Albert was in Collège des Frères, that's a college of priests, Christian. And my son is nervous when he saw the Arab insult, curse the Jews. They beat him. Sometimes he came bloody in face. I was very upset, and I don't want to do. I want to take him out from the school. Big lawyer told me he has to be 16 years to go to New York. My son was 14. He don't want to take him. I beg him to do exception and take my son. He didn't want it. We called New York, and I spoke Hebrew with Rabbi Kalmanovich. I explained him the situation, and I begged him to take him. I told him I don't want you to spend a penny on him. I am willing to pay every expense you do for my son, I pay it. In June '57, I sent my son Albert to New York.
It was exciting, you know, you go to America. My father tells me, go to the yeshiva. So Rabbi Kalmanowitz called Senator Javits of New York. He knew him well. He said, I have to get some Jews boys out of Egypt. He said, okay, get me who you want. He brought in about 27, 28 boys from Egypt. I was the youngest.
My age was 16 and a half years old, and I was approached to come to Mir Yeshiva while I was working in Egypt. And I was a volunteer at the rabbinate in Cairo, helping out Jewish people to emigrate and to leave Egypt as fast as possible. The government decided to go after the boys that were doing this work. I was arrested, and they told me I needed to sign a paper that I'm a spy for Israel. Otherwise, heavy interrogation, beating with bamboo sticks on my feet, etc. I refused to sign it, and I was evicted from the country, and I was sent out on a stateless passport, which is the water, the oceans is my country. I had no country left. And at the same time, they gave me a document called the laissez-passer. And it was stamped on it, dangerous for the public security. Rabbi Kalmanovich helped me for sure. I consider him an angel, a saving angel.
Between August 1956 and September 1957, Rabbi Kalmanowitz rescued 39 boys from Syria, Egypt, and Morocco. But their new life at the yeshiva felt foreign to them.
We used to sleep like 6, 7 in a room, bunk beds, and it was cold. They used to give us $1 a week. We used to write mail with it, wash our clothes with it, take haircuts with it. It was Ashkenaz food. Saturday, we used to eat frozen chicken. Every Shabbat during the day, they used to give us frozen chicken because they couldn't heat it up.
The yeshiva was very poor. The food was very simple. In Syria, we never saw dark bread, pumpernickel, and the peanut butter. What's peanut butter in the morning to eat? The peanut butter with, with jelly. We don't use that.
When I first came, I didn't speak English. I didn't speak a word. I didn't know any Syrian girls. They didn't want to talk to me. I was a banana boat. I got depressed.
I ended up walking away from the yeshiva because I felt that I needed to earn money so I can bring my family to the country. I left the Mir Yeshiva and I slept on a bench in Setlo Park for 48 hours without any food in my mouth in the wintertime. Eventually, I walked down towards Bay Parkway. By divine providence, I walked out on 66th Street, and Sophie Maslaton happened to have gone at that moment throwing her garbage. And I'm walking by, tears in my eyes, hungry, and she says, "Kid, what are you so upset? Why are you crying? Why don't you come in, I'll give you breakfast, and then we'll sit down and talk." And she called Isidore Dayan. And he arranged for me immediately, and he proceeded to take care of whatever I needed for about a year and a half on the expense of Ahiezer, which I am very grateful and very thankful that they were there for me. Without them, really, I would have been totally lost.
The Syrian Jews of Brooklyn embraced Rabbi Kalmanowitz's boys with open arms. In turn, the boys would work hard, raise families, and give back to the Mir Yeshiva and the community that helped them so much. The Six-Day War changed the political climate throughout the Middle East. Nowhere was safe for the Jews. After thousands of years of living in Arab lands, more than 500,000 Jews were in search of a new home.
Every single Jew thought about leaving. It was unbelievable, like a big tree that they shook, and all the birds, they went all over the world. Brazil, Mexico, Panama. We gathered from Halab, from Damascus, and from Beirut. So now, wherever you go in all the world, you see Middle Eastern Jewish people living in everywhere.
Young men and women were emigrating from Lebanon to the New World, and my parents decided to go to Mexico. It took 6 years, 6 arduous years, but finally we received the okay to emigrate. It was Pesach, Erev Pesach. I was 10, and we received the news. Of course, my father cried, my mother cried. I remember we celebrated that Pesach when we would say the Mish'arotam, Serot Besilotam al Shichmam, and we were asked, Mnen Jaye, where are you coming from? We would say, from Misraim, from Egypt. Lawen Rayeh, where are you going? The answer is usually to Yerushalayim. But that night of Pesach, as we celebrated it, we said something else. We were asked, Mnen Jaye, where are you coming from? We said, from Beirut. Lawen Rayeh, where are you going to? We said, to Mexico. So we felt as though we were back in Egypt, as our forefathers.
بشلق برو اتعام بلونا حام إلهيم ديرخ إرس بلشتيم كي كروب هوكي أمر إلهيم بين النحيم هام بالقتام الحمام بشابو مصرايما ويسيب إلهيم اتعام ديرخ مدبار يمسوف بحموشيم علو بن إسرائيل ميرس مصرايم.
Okay. I'd like to call upon our moderator, Joey Mosseri, and all our panelists. Please come to the stage. Mr. Isaac Zacko Chehebar, Irene Mamiye, Raymond Habert, Mony, Barnathan, Clement Soffer, Maurice Shalam.
Good evening, everyone. As you saw in this clip, life for the Jews in Egypt wasn't rosy. It was unbelievable prior to that time period. Department stores, the entire train system, sports clubs, synagogues, hachamim, school. Jews were living in villas. They had cities built by Jews, avenues in different areas that were, each avenue was named after a different Jewish family. They were living in the age of King Farouk. And the king loved the Jews. He had Jews on his Senate. The president of the Jewish community was on the king's Senate, Mr. Moise Katawi. The chief rabbi of Egypt, Rabbi Hayim Nahum Effendi, was part of the Academy of Languages and was a very close friend of the king. And everything was perfect for the Jewish community. Things changed. Yesterday, November 29th, marked 75 years from the date of the UN declaration of a resolution to partition Palestine into a Jewish and Arab state. For the Jews, it was a wonderful time, a very happy time. But that's when things began to change. People's lives began to change, and the hatred suddenly was felt. Even though we saw in the film 1952, 1956, 1957, Jews began to leave almost immediately. We have with us tonight Mr. Maurice Shalam. Maurice was born in 1930 And he told me himself that with the declaration of the State of Israel, they saw the writing on the wall. They realized Egypt was no longer a home for the Jews. Maurice, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, about your history, what caused you to leave?
Well, it wasn't easy to stay after the declaration of the State of Israel. So in 1948, started the demonstrations, throwing stones at us in the houses, in the street. One day, my brother-in-law, Joseph Chehebar, said, I have to go to the bank. For what? I have to pay a note. But it's dangerous outside. No, I'll take a taxi. He got into the taxi. He went. We didn't know what happened. All of a sudden, he comes back, all bloody, heads open. Someone stops in traffic. They open the door. Here's a Jew. I took him out. I beat him up. So my mother and my sister said, we can't stay like this. It became summer of 48. We went to Alexandria for the summer. And the talk was, which country is giving visa to leave, to accept refugees? And some people said Santo Domingo. I went home, I opened the dictionary. Where is Santo Domingo? I didn't know what it was. Yeah. Okay, they worked on it, they gave us visas. Being a British subject, the Shalam family, we could leave right away. But my mother won't leave because my sister married Joseph Chehebar and the Egyptian. Every day I have to go downtown to the government office to check if our number came out. Their number came out. It took 6 months till February, and then we left in March of 49. And my mother went to the consulate. She told the British consulate, I need a job for my daughter and my son. He said, lady, there's no future for you here. You British subject, we'll take you to South Africa. South Africa? No one there. So no, we guarantee you, we establish you everything. Yeah, but my brothers and father are in New York. That's you're on your own. Okay, she said, I'll come to New York. Not to New York, to Santo Domingo, but we're stopping in New York because my brother was getting married. He had left Egypt 6 months before. And we came here for 2 weeks, and then it was Pesach time. We applied for extension. They gave us 2 more weeks, and after Hamas, we left to. So my future father-in-law said, you can't go to Santo Domingo. It's a dictator. You can't be there. Go to Havana. A lot of Americans go to Havana. Yeah, but to have a visa to Santo Domingo, I said, I'll take you to a lawyer. He took us to a lawyer. He got us a visa. They let us stay for 6 months. If you don't get involved in politics, they give us the residence. That's what we did. I stayed 6 years in Havana and then came to New York. My brother and sister stayed, my brother-in-law and my sister stayed till 1958.
So you left Havana in 55 and came to New York? And
I came for a visit.
Right.
Took a tourist. I never went back. But the lawyer said, wait, after you get married, I'll tell you when to leave. Became 1958. I was married. I had a baby, my first daughter, Julie. And we went to Havana. And then he said, okay, I thought, how long going to be? He said, no, 2-3 days. We'll go to the consulate. Okay, the paper are right. Okay, now we have to check your health, your chest. When can you come? Don't tell me. He said, next month. No, I can't be here next month. We called the lawyer. He said, I'm going to talk to the guy. Go the next day to the same guy. I went to the same guy the next day. I told him, I'm here. He said, when can you make it? This afternoon or tomorrow? I said, no, today. We finished, that we came. Thank God we survived. But really it was bad in Egypt. We couldn't, I was in school, I was the only Jew and 500 student Arab people. And one day I was walking in the school. The principal said, "Where are you going?" I said, "We have religion." He said, "Yeah, well, we have an hour of a class for religion." So, "Yeah, but they're Christians." He said, "Where are you?" I told him, "Israeli." So you can't be walking to school. Go sit downstairs in the schoolyard for the hour, and then you come back. Yeah. That was the...
Right, so they started to make things difficult for you, and you got out. But how did you get out? How did you leave? From Cairo, did you go to Alexandria to leave? Did you go to Port Said to leave?
No, Port Said.
You went to Port Said?
We took a boat from Port Said. So the boat was a freighter that had an accident in the Suez Canal, and it was going direct to New York, non-stop. 14 days, we saw only sky and water. And every day, we told them we don't eat that food. It's not a tourist cruise or anything. There's no kosher, no nothing. Okay, what are you going to do? So, what can you eat? Eggs? Okay. Every meal, they put 5-6 dozen eggs on the table. Here's your meal. Morning, afternoon, and night. Came Friday, my mother said, "It's enough." She went to the steward. She told him, "Don't you have supply?" He said, "Yeah." So show me what you have. So he opened it. "Here's rice." "Okay, give me rice." "What's this?" "Peas." "Give me peas." "And there's beans, white beans." "Okay." "Potatoes." "Okay." We ate regular. My mother went to her luggage. She took out the pots and pans she brought with her. and she had, from then, like 10 days, we ate normal.
Okay, so you had fasulya and rose every day. All right, but you survived and you made it to New York. You got to Cuba and you were able to rebuild yourselves, reestablish yourselves.
In Havana.
In Havana, before coming to New York and then doing it again in New York.
In the beginning, it was very hard. Didn't know language, didn't know money, or know nothing. My mother tells me, "Go get us some pan from the grocery store." I said, "What should I say?" So she said, "Pan." So I looked, I don't know what to do. You go to the bus, you don't know the money. You give them, they give you change, put it in my pocket. Next time you go, you take more dollars because we don't know how much to give him. Like this until we get used to it. Until we established business. And in the beginning it was very hard. Thank God it was good.
Baruch Hashem. So not everybody was as keen as the Shalams to leave so early. He didn't taste the effects of the Suez crisis that occurred from 56 to 57.
56.
From 56 to 57. It lasted over that period of time. He wasn't there for the overthrow by Gamal Abdel Nasser and the army officers overthrowing the regime of the king. And they didn't feel the hatred that came later on. Most of us here are more familiar with that period. And that's when things started to change. That's when property began to become sequestered. That's when the nationalization began as well. One of the earlier people that left in that period was Mr. Raymond Habert and his family. So I would like to hear from Raymond. Tell us what caused you to leave, what was going on, how you got out, what were your connections?
We left actually in end of 57 because after that three countries war, 56, things became rougher than they were. They really started getting rough, and that we felt it at the time, was from the time they took out the king and Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power. I recall that in 1952, the city and the country was on fire, a lot of fires all over the place, and they threw out the king and they exiled him to Europe, and Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power, He was very anti-Semite, and his agenda was took the Jews as a scapegoat for his power, and the Jews started to have a difficult life. From 48 to 52, while it was still a kingdom, we were comfortable. We got away as usual. When Gamal Abdel Nasser came and nationalized all the Jewish entities, from banks to department stores to the Jews were very influential, owning a lot of assets and equities in a big way in Egypt. So they figured they'll take advantage and put their hold on the money of the Jews, which was quite a bit. And and he put venom into the population of the Egyptians, and they start hating the Jews. We start feeling a little bit persecution, and like Mar said in the past, they start throwing stones on the Jews, give us a hard time, and they picked on us walking the streets. It was kind of dangerous and stuff like that. So when 56 came, things got much worse. They started to put some people in jail. They started throwing some Jews out of the country to the Jews and all the foreigners, because it was France, England, and Israel. So they took it on all the foreigners, and they tried throwing all the... And a lot of the Egyptian Jews happened to be of European nationality. Some had English passports, some had French passport, Italian passport. So they were first to be thrown out, and then they start putting in jail all the people that were like leaders of the community. They started getting rid of them and put them in jail and throw them out of the country. So we felt the persecution was getting very strong, and it's time to leave. And we left on our own, but in reality, they didn't throw us out. Until then, we lived a comfortable life. We weren't missing anything. We're not short of anything. We had all our luxuries and conveniences. We went to good schools. We had good housing, and we were comfortable. But after 56, the writing was on the wall, and we decided to leave on our own. And we left from the port of Alexandria in 58 and 57, and we went to Greece as a stopover to go to Israel. And then when we arrived in Greece, the highest received us in Greece, and they asked us, there is a new bill that's passing in the U.S. about taking some Middle Eastern Jews from the Middle Eastern countries, if we wanted to apply to a visa to a resident in New York.
Right, as a refugee status.
As a refugee status, but as an immigrant with a resident status. So we accepted. They said we just have to wait till it's all finalized, and so we waited in Greece for about 5-6 months, and the Hajj took care of us. We were comfortable. They put us up. They put us up in comfortable lodging, and we 6 months later we left about May or June of 1958. We took the boat and came to America.
Wonderful. So Mr. Habert told us what it was like for his family to leave. It wasn't so easy for most families to leave. There was a lot of red tape involved. And even though the Egyptian government wasn't making it easy for you to live there, they also didn't make it easy for you to leave. A lot of documentation was necessary, and getting these documents was a bit tricky at times. Mr. Clement Soffer, even though he was just a teenager at the time, he was well connected with the deputy chief rabbi at the time, who was Acham Abraham Shweka, who saw Clem's knowledge and talents and was able to call him into the rabbinate to help out. Clem, can you please tell us about that?
B'Shem Hashem b'na'aseh v'nasliach.
the name of all names, we will do and we will accomplish. Rabbi Shweka was my rabbi for several years, and when he was promoted to be the substitute of the chief rabbi, being that I was his student and I had a relation and a connection with him, and he felt that I might be able to help him, he took me in under his wings as a volunteer to work at the rabbinate. I came in the rabbinate the first day at 8 o'clock. I was, at the time, 15 and a half. By the time I finished that day at 7:30, I was 30 years old. I grew 15 years just watching the chaos, the fear that was installed from the rabbinate and from the amount of people wanted to run because of the devastation. The devastation was enormous. Most people in Egypt had no clue. But I became exposed to the heart of it. Nasser declared, all Jews in Egypt are spies, on media, newspaper. Overnight, my next-door neighbor was my best friend. The following day, I was his biggest enemy. This is what created the hatred. Nasser had to cover up for his losses. Israel came in 2 days from Israel into Suez. You know where Suez is? 50 miles from Cairo. Another 50 miles, the IDF, they take them out and throw them in the garbage. But America, you had John Foster Dulles here, Secretary of State, stopped them. He says, don't go any further. We'll make peace. He's going to allow you to go through the Suez Canal. That was the problem for us, because the hatred was already installed. They took close to 20,000 people, all the richest Jews, put them in jail, and the rest started to fear for their life. In the Haret El Yahud, which was the ghettos, we had 4,000 or 5,000 Jews there. They blew a bomb. 200 people were killed. They attacked the women. They raped them. They slit the throat of the children. This is what was happening in the poor section. The rich section was flying out. Then we had a problem. You know, we have Hakarata Tov, Hakarata Lev. We care for each other. As you see here tonight, we care for each other. Joseph is Syrian. He cares for the Egyptian. The Egyptian cares for Joseph. That's what unites us. That is the fact. So now that Rabbi Shweka had a bigger problem. If the rich Jews left, the poor Jews will not be supported. Who's going to support these people? That's the reason why today, from 85,000, you have 2 or 3 Jews left. My job first was to write certificate. This is what I went in as a volunteer. I go into the archive that date from 1830. They had started the archives. Deaths, weddings, births, everything was written there. All I have to do is look for a folio, catch the family, issue a certificate, initial it, give it to the rabbi. The rabbi signed it. He trusts that I did the right job. So not only I was doing this, we were 7 boys doing this job, all volunteers. Within a month, the rabbi said, this has to stop. We need to remove all the 5,000 Jews out of Egypt immediately. So our job changed. Instead of just being researchers, he replaced us with other 5, 7 boys additional. My job with the others, we make the certificate, we go to the old quarters, we take the family, take them to the government, get them their exit visa, put them on the boat, and ship them out. We did that. We did that for 3 months. We took out almost 2,800 Jews out of Egypt in that fashion. The secret police came in one day in the rabbinate, spoke to the rabbis. This is against the country. You're against the best interests of Egypt. You don't stop, we put you all in jail. Why? Oh, because the Jews that you're sending to Cyprus, to Marseille, to reception center in Vienna, are going to go to Israel. They're going to come back as soldiers, and they know everything about Egypt. So in essence, you are helping the Israeli army to conquer, and that's what they did to us in Suez about just a few months back. You cannot do that. We stopped for 3 weeks. But the rabbi, again, Hakarat Halev, he's got to worry about these Jews because the rich are leaving, the poor will never leave. They have no means. They have no way to leave. They're helpless. So then we had to continue. How do we continue? He got a brilliant idea, but brought the Swiss Red Cross. Overnight, don't come here, Clement. Go to the Swiss Red Cross. You'll get a bandana. You'll get an ID with a picture. You can walk any place. You're now an employee. Don't ever come to the rabbinate. You go there. You know the job. You know what to go to the people. You know how to do that. Send them out. We continued. The Egyptian police and secret police were stunned. They didn't know what to do. We have protection from the Red Cross. So they hesitated. We took advantage of that hesitation and shipped as many as we could. In the interim, I was preparing for me to come to America because I was involved with Rabbi Kalmanovich already. I had my papers prepared. My visa was almost prepared. I was ready to leave. 3 days before leaving, 3 mukhabarat met me at the metro, and I say, an officer wants to talk to you in the Caracol, in Heliopolis. I went with them to the Caracol of Heliopolis. But I said to them, can I just talk to my mother to tell her that I'm going to be wild for what? You can't. I said, okay, if you don't do that, I'm going to go. I started to go. They beat me up, hit with a gunman on my head. They pushed me into a car. They got me into a car. Now I am in the front of the Caracol in front of a young officer, a punk of about maybe 28, 29 years old. He wants to show off to Nasser that he got himself a spy. Now he tells me, listen, we warned you. We were in the rabbinate. We told you, you are an Egyptian citizen. You have an Egyptian nationality. You are responsible. The Red Cross, let me see your papers. He ripped it, threw it in the garbage, took the bandana. He says, you are our citizen here. We warned you. Now you better sign this paper. You are a spy. We told you you're going to be a spy. I said, I can't sign this paper. You can't sign? They took me on the side. They started to beat me on my legs with bamboo sticks. Sign the paper. I cannot sign. You know why? Because if I sign that paper, tomorrow morning I'm going to hang in a public square. Tomorrow morning. Besides that, my bigger fear, I didn't care about me anymore because I knew I was in big trouble. I didn't care, but I cared about my family. Because if I hang in a public square, my family would disappear. My brother, my mother, my sister, they will all be killed because I'm the spy. They're involved. I would not sign. You have to sign. In the meantime, the Red Cross was notified. And I need to tell you something very important. Hashem is wonderful. Hashem is the greatest. Every one of us have a portion. It's built in our DNA. He helps us. I'm going to tell you. As I was walking in the Caracol that morning, 2 police officers are on the guard on outside. Those 2 police officers, I knew them because they were my police officer in my shul. They were there every morning. I give them an apple. I give them a cookie. I give them some money. They were my friends. And I took care of them for maybe a year and a half. I walked into the Caracol. They looked at me. They were shocked. So they winked at me and I winked at them. But I could not do anything because they were inferior. These are superiors with stars with me. That's where we're going. This is secret police. So I went in there. Meantime, they ran and spoke to the Sheikh al-Hara, which is like the mayor of the area where we live. They told him Clement was taken in for interrogation. It's a problem for him. See if he can help him. Sheikh al-Hara loved my parents. So he went to my parents. My parents went to the Red Cross. The Red Cross said, it's impossible that the Egyptian government just does not ignore our protection. So they started working on with the Minister of Interior. Meanwhile, this officer was getting the word the Red Cross is going to come and they can release this boy from you. So he needed to move at a speed of lightning to get me to sign. If I didn't sign, he lost a spy. So what he did, he took his gun, put one bullet in it, and played Russian roulette and come to my brain and say, are you going to sign? No. Click. Immediately. I can tell you, I don't wish it on a dog or an animal to feel what I felt. One bullet, I'm gone. But you know what? I felt it was good because if I go, at least I didn't sign, my family will not be hurt. My family will not be touched. So as I'll take the bullet. It wasn't there. Second bullet, wasn't there. Third bullet. Do you know where I was by the third bullet? I promise you, you don't want to see it. You don't want to feel what I felt. On the third bullet, I said to Hashem, save me, you're the only one. Nobody can save me. You going to have to save me, Hashem. You know what happened? A thought came into my mind. There is no bullets in that gun. He must have taken the bullet out as he was walking in back of me and around me. He took the bullet out. Why? Because if he had a bullet and he killed me, he lost the spy. I didn't sign the paper. He would have lost everything. So he took out the bullet just to scare me. So I was no longer scared of that gun. That gun was empty. So I didn't care. Within a minute and a half after that, the door opened up. The guy from the Red Cross with the Minister of Interior was there. Said, this boy, you got to release him. You cannot touch him. He was supposed to be working for the Red Cross. This is now an international problem you created for us. You got to release him.
Thank you, Clem. Thank you.
You want me to stop? Continue?
No, stop. Clem has plenty to say, but we have so many others. So as Clem told you, he volunteered at the rabbinate, at the Hacham Khana, at the community center to help out, save lives, save people. But he wasn't the only one. Even Mr. Barnathan here, as a young child, he also was involved. He helped give out blankets to save people, people that were cold, people that were hungry, people that had no shelter. At the Hacham Khana. So we'll hear from Mony. Please tell us.
Well, you know, after school was closed, being in a French school and it became an Arabic school, so was hesitant to go there, being that not even one friend, not even one Jew going there or anything else. So may he rest in peace, my brother-in-law, Albert Savdi, they threw him out of his job because they took it over the Arabs. You know, they took the place of, it was a big department store. He was in the wholesale department, and they threw him out. He went to work for Hacham Khana. But being that it's so much things involved in that Hacham Khana that day, and lines of people, so he used to grab me by the hand. He lived with us because they were afraid to live by themselves, him and my sister. He grabbed my hands, come with me. We'll go in a taxi, we'll get to Hacham Khana, and here I am, a little boy, giving out blankets, bringing out blankets and towels, and blankets and towels, and lines, and lines, and lines. Everybody asked me for two, I give them two, you know, just to make everybody happy, whatever it was. And that's what I did for a period of time, but not all the time. And then, finally, we decided to come to America.
But your father was also involved in helping people over there, wasn't he?
My father, you know very well, he helped.
Sure.
He helped so many people. You know that.
He helped my grandmother. He helped my uncles, my aunts. He helped.
Yes.
Without him, they wouldn't have gotten out.
They wouldn't have got out, yes.
But I heard he helped many others. Is that true?
It's very true. He had so many people he helped. I can't describe you. I can't describe you. One guy was a Jew, and he became a Muslim. He made sure to bring him back to be a Jew. And this man spent Pesach with us in Egypt 1 year. He had Haggadah with us and everything else. My father took him, and the rabbi told him, says, take him with bolo, you know, like put him in the mikveh, you know, this way he could become a Jew. And that's one thing he did that was really, we were very proud of at the time. And a lot of And a lot of girls wanted to become Muslims, and he breaks it, and he gives them money. He used to get everything involved. Everything was involved for being, to be a Jew. That was really the thing.
Right, so his involvement didn't stop over there. When he got here and you all got here, he was involved once again.
Oh, once again, that's another thing.
Didn't he work on building the community and creating it?
He made sure that we have a synagogue called Avigdor. He made sure that he begged and pleaded. One lady on Avenue R, it was a beauty parlor, then it was a nice piece of land, and she was selling it. He begged her, he pleaded with her. Finally, she signed the contract. And that's how Habert got created from that day. I mean, with the help of two other guys with him, with Raymond Habert and Gabriel Chehebar, they were all involved, all in the same.
Right, so basically they persevered. They didn't let Nasser, they didn't let what was going on in Egypt hold them down. They were able to bring themselves up, pick themselves up, rebuild themselves, and reestablish themselves, and reestablish a very proud Egyptian community here in New York. And here we are in the center tonight.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So Zacko, tell us about yourself. You were a kid. You were just a kid. You were about 10 years old when you left, right?
When I left, I was 10 years old. I don't have a recollection of all these, anti-Semitic situation. It was a happy place for me.
Mm-hmm.
But when we had the Sinai crisis, then it got really bad. They started bombing. As a matter of fact, we were in an apartment building, all of us huddled, and they used to have to shut the lights all in the area.
Mm-hmm.
The sirens come, and everything shuts down. And there was one bomb that went in our backyard that never exploded. This is just one incident. But
this was in Heliopolis.
In Heliopolis, yes. We moved to Heliopolis from Dahir, المنسي, من حارة اليهود, from my grandfather and so on. And then they confiscated the store, and my father said, we have to leave. Leave where? My mother is freaking out. Where are we going to go? He says, we have to leave. Anyway, we had family in America, my father's cousins and so on. He says, we'll go there, we'll see what happens. Like my brother-in-law Raymond said, they give us a laissez-passer. You are stateless, So we couldn't take anything. The only thing that my father took was all the pictures from all our years. Boxes and luggage of pictures. That's the only thing he took, which now we enjoy so much. My kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, they see these pictures, they're in awe.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we go to Alexandria. I have my uncle Maurice. He came with us. And we go on a freight boat. It's called the Steel Fabricator. I still remember the name.
Mm-hmm.
It was a freighter. We went in. They put us in the hull. That thing, you have no rooms on top. We're in the hull.
Mm-hmm.
They put us with all the cooks and the engineers of the boat. And then we sailed. We passed the canal, and we went on to the Atlantic. And then 2.5 weeks down the line, it started to get very rough. It was like November at the time, and it was going up and down for the next 2 weeks. We were vomiting every day. We had to go to the bridge and put on our life jackets, Until we got to New York, it was horrible. The smell of the food down there, like Maurice said, my mother was able to make some rice every day for us to eat. It was unbelievable. But when we saw the Statue of Liberty, that was like We forgot about everything. It was like a dream. Yeah. So we came, we stayed in New York. We tried to stay here, but we couldn't. We had to go somewhere else and wait for our turn because they had a quota system. So we had my Uncle Suso in Cuba. So he told my father, come. Huh? You did. We had my uncle there. He said, come, I have an alligator bag factory. You'll help me, whatever. You know, it's amazing, like we make these big steps without even thinking in those days. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we go to Cuba, okay? And we stay there, and my father helps my uncle in the factory. Everything is great. It was the best part of my life. Swimming, going to school, learning Spanish. You know, when Batista was in Cuba, you know, the Havana was like Las Vegas. Hotels, clubs, casinos, freedom. It was wonderful.
The good life.
The good life. And everything was going well until Castro came. And my uncle got his turn to come, and we stayed there by ourselves for another, how many years? Another 2 years. And then we came here. I don't have time to tell you the other part of the story some other time, but Baruch Hashem, you know, America's been good to me.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah, God bless America, that's for sure.
Fantastic. So everybody has amazing stories. And they have these memories of Egypt, growing up there, the good, the bad, the pictures. But there's another facet, something that we don't always think of. What we lacked, or what was taken away from us in the sense of upbringing, in the sense of family, in the sense of that Jewishness that we take for granted at times. Irene, tell us, were you born in Egypt or not?
Not quite. No.
You weren't?
No.
So do you feel a little bit different sitting with these gentlemen on this panel, or do you feel at home with them?
I feel very at home, and because I remember my mother, who was quite the storyteller, sounding so much like each of the gentlemen here, and it's given me fantastic memories, and I'm here for them. I'm here to memorialize my parents.
Fantastic.
Sorry? Really? Amazing.
So Irene, when and where were you born, and what is the story behind that, please?
Okay, so my parents were living in Cairo, and the story goes, in 1957, foot guards knocked on the door and gave them a notice of expulsion. They had 7 days to go, to leave the country. Again, I lived my whole childhood listening to these stories and looking at photographs. So it feels as if I almost lived through it myself. They started taking furniture, taking chandeliers off the wall, and within 7 days, my parents were on a ship. They found my uncle and aunt there. They were also expatriated. Sabatino, Avigdor, and my aunt Esti. When they opened the map, I always have this vision of them opening a map on the boat and deciding where they would go. My uncle and aunt said they would go to Brazil because of the weather is similar to Egypt and the lifestyle. My parents spoke French, so they said, we'll go to France. We got to Marseille, and they got off there. It was all supposed to be very temporary, and the idea was to reunite in Israel with the rest of the family. Years later, I found out that they almost lost me on the boat on the journey over. But I was born a few months later in Marseille, and they received letters from Israel saying, "Do not come here. It's very bad conditions." My mother was the youngest of 7, and they felt she wouldn't be able to withstand the conditions there. My aunt was sent, and uncle were sent to the desert, to the Negev, and they lived in almost like a tin hut with an outhouse. So growing up in France, I'll just mention a few incidents, like to give it a little color, and
please,
or just an idea of what that was like. So my dad was an accountant, and he was hired and fired 3 times. His employers said very clearly, "We do not hire Jews. We do not trust Jews." When it came time for me to go to school, they advised me to go as a little French girl, Catholic French girl. Obviously, they were trying to protect me and keep me safe physically, but mentally that had a lot of repercussions that I still feel today. I remember I was sent away for a month because I was a sickly child, and in France they take the sickly children and send them away for a month. I was 8 or 9 years old, and it was Sunday, and it was church day, and I went to church I just went along, and I'll never forget the taste of the wafer that the priest put in my mouth, Every Sunday after that, I was psychomatically sick. Like I got either a stomachache or, sore throat. I never went back to church. When I was 12 years old, my mom came to visit her family here in the United States, in Brooklyn, and she came back from that trip, and she said, we're moving to New York. I'll never forget coming down Ocean Parkway. It was December of 1969, and the street was lined with menorahs in the window. And that took me back to a few years before that, when I remember knock on the door and having to hide a menorah, the menorah in the house. So, yeah, coming to America was really hopeful and welcoming, and thank God turned out.
Right, so basically the Jewishness that they had in Egypt, that everybody ran away from to preserve, was plucked away from you and your life in childhood in Marseille.
Correct. And
it wasn't brought back to you till you reunited here in Brooklyn, here in New York.
Yeah, but what was lost, was really lost forever. I never met so many of my relatives, my grandmothers, grandfathers. I never saw them, never met them. My uncle ended up living in Rio, forever, just passed away recently. Yeah, it was like my whole identity and my birthright was taken away from me.
But like Zacko, you have pictures.
So many. Yes.
A lot of pictures you mentioned. You've been able to, over the years, find out who these relatives are and your connection to each of them, and you share that with your family as well.
Of course. It was the only link to my identity. Pictures have always been so important. I think that's why I became a photographer.
That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Thank you.
So as you see, life in Egypt never ended. Life in Egypt continues right here, in this room, on Ocean Parkway, in Brooklyn, in our lives, in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls. And this is something that we can never let die, we can never let go away. We must perpetuate it, and we must pass it on to the next generation and generations after that. I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. We're talking about lives, and even though we've technically left Egypt, Egypt still holds remnants, a lot of remnants of its Jewish past. One thing I'd like to bring up very, very quickly is that there's a tremendous millennium-old cemetery right outside Cairo. Well, now it's part of Cairo. It's called Basatin. And Clement Soffer, as well as many others, have been working tirelessly for decades to upkeep it, to restore it, to rebuild it. And it's something that goes under the radar, people don't know about. So please, if you're interested, speak to Clem after this, find out more, and I think it's worthwhile that you let people know about it and get involved. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you to the center. Thank you to Joey Sid. Thank you to Marlene Mamie, to Ricky Novick. Thank you, everybody.